Hi everyone, I'm going to do a quick rundown of chapter 1 of Animal Farm for you, so you have a quick overview. First of all, we're introduced in the very beginning of the chapter to Farmer Jones, and he is not portrayed in a positive light. We are told from the get-go that he's drunk and he often neglects his duties to the animals. In this particular case, he didn't shut the pop holes for the chickens, so they were able to get out, which is good in this case because they can go to the meeting with Old Major. But it's just an example of how he often does things carelessly and he doesn't pay enough attention to them. He's meant, of course, to sort of be another version, right, of Tsar Nicholas and have a lot of the same kinds of qualities because Tsar Nicholas didn't pay enough attention to his people. He just indulged in the things he wanted to for himself, and he didn't worry about whether or not any of the Russian people, particularly the common people, whether or not they had anything that they needed to survive and be functional. We are introduced to a lot of the barnyard animals in this scene. You see like all of them kind of coming together and gathering. You've got the pigs and the dogs and the horses, and there's a donkey, and there's even little ducklings that wander in. And Boxer is one of those characters, as well as Clover, the two workhorses. And Boxer is portrayed as being very hardworking, but not incredibly bright. And he represents the proletariat, the working class people who aren't typically educated, but who work exceptionally hard. Orwell's words to describe him is he's respected for his steadiness of character and tremendous powers of work. And then Clover is very similar, although she does have a feminine aspect. She is portrayed as a very motherly figure. Another thing that is interesting to pay attention to as you're meeting these different characters is that even though they're animals, Orwell does things to make them sound more like people at the same time. For example, with Clover, it says that she never quite got her figure back after having her last foal. So that's an expression that we would typically apply to a human rather than an animal. We also meet Molly, who is also a horse, but she's the cart horse. And because her job is to pull Jones's cart around and go into town, she is a little more spoiled. It talks about how she has her sugar cubes that she's chewing on when she gets there, and she's got her ribbons in her hair, and she tosses her head all around like, hi, look at me and my ribbons. And she is meant to represent the middle class to upper middle class, what was known as the bourgeoisie, and these the people that typically under the Tsar were really had a good life because they still had means. They didn't have to work as hard. They weren't as downtrodden as the working class under the Tsar. And then the cat. The cat is meant to represent possibly the educated elite. The cat specifically, we're told, votes on both sides and is kind of just laying around and is being really lazy. So you get this impression that the cat can do whatever it wants and nobody stops it. And it relies on everyone else. It's not a very positive portrayal of the elite in Russia. The animals in general as a whole represent the Russian working class, and they're those that are subjects of the Tsar. Old Major represents Marx, who was the leader of not even the Communist Party, because it didn't exist in and of itself, but he was sort of the father of communism, came up with the whole idea of communism, socialism. Let's see. And then, of course, Jones is like the Tsar specifically, but in a more general sense. Jones could represent any poor leader, any leader that doesn't do a very good job advocating for the people, taking care of the people, somebody that's neglectful. And that's something that Orwell wanted his readers to understand, that yes, this specifically is meant to represent the Russian Revolution, but this could happen anywhere. And that's why it's located in England. Because, yeah, this may have actually happened in Russia, but it could happen in England. And it was meant to be a cautionary tale that this could happen anywhere. And it's a microcosm, right? That's one of those terms that was on one of the handouts I had you guys take a look at last Friday, I think is when it was on the schedule. But a microcosm is like a world in miniature, and the farm is that, and it's meant to represent anywhere that could potentially become it could have the same kinds of problems with a tyrannical leader that Russia had and that Animal Farm ultimately will have. I'm right now under Jones as far as you guys have read. Let's see. I bounced around a little bit, was a little out of order there. Major's speech is passionate and hopeful, and that is the intention is that readers on hearing it will be sympathetic with the animals. It's meant to connect you with their situation and their plight so that you feel for them and connect to the characters. Let's see. One of the early signs that things are not going to go well is when the rats get chased by the dogs. And then there's this vote about whether or not the wild animals should be included in this utopia that the animals are creating. And there's disagreement. Not everybody's on the same page, which is meant to indicate that it's not always going to be easy, and that there's going to be disagreement among the animals once they do manage to have the revolution. And that's what you see in Russia once the Russian Revolution has occurred. Evil. What is evil about man? What are the man's evil ways that the animals are supposed to avoid? They walk on two legs. So anything that walks on two legs or doesn't have wings is bad, right? They make that concession kind of for the birds, because the birds have wings, and obviously they walk on two legs. So if it walks on two legs and doesn't have wings, then it's evil. And some of the evil ways that Major lists that man have: living in houses, sleeping in beds, wearing clothes, drinking alcohol, smoking tobacco, handling money or being involved with money, engaging in trade. And the big one, the most important one, is tyrannizing other animals. It is never okay for one animal to try to hold power or control over another animal. And all of this is meant to relate to the idea that the Russian people shouldn't adopt the ways of the ruling class once they manage to take over and have the control of their own government. So once the revolution has occurred in Russia, the idea is you don't want to adopt the same bad habits that the Tsar had. You don't want to end up being just like the Tsar. And at the end, they all sing Beast of England, which is almost like their national anthem. You'll see that they sing it quite often eventually. And the mood at this point is happy and patriotic. The animals have renewed energy and optimism because of the song. One little thing that is interesting to point out is when they talk about the song before it begins, Orwell says that it's a stirring tune, which is meant to, of course he's British, so it's a very British way of saying things, but it's meant to imply that this song is like, makes everybody's hearts just feel like, oh, this is such a beautiful song, and I feel so emotional and connected with my fellow animals. But then he tells you that the tune is somewhere in between Clementine and La Cucaracha. So, you know, like, oh my darling, oh my darling, oh my darling, Clementine, and La Cucaracha, La Cucaracha, La Cucaracha. They're not serious songs. They're silly songs. So it's one way in which Orwell's building a satire here, because he wants you to recognize that you shouldn't take this completely seriously, because they are animals and they aren't really all that sophisticated. And he's poking fun at the whole Russian Revolution thing by representing all of this through animals. So it's meant to be amusing and silly along the way. That's why he includes things like the fact that Clover hasn't gotten her figure back. So that's chapter 1 of Animal Farm. You guys have the rap sheet due for that on the 21st of April, which is today, the day I'm going to post this video. And as always, if you have any questions or aren't sure about anything, please don't hesitate to get a hold of me and ask me via email or whatever method you can use to track me down. You can ask questions on ClassKick too, right in the assignments. Emails I'll see faster because I get notifications right to my phone. So oftentimes I'll even respond to you at 10 o'clock at night if I'm still awake. So I hope you're all doing well, and I miss you, and hope that we can chat soon. Take care.